Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Could you state your full name?
Hold on one second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. You all finish up. You're going to wait a second.
Yeah, I apologize, Judge.
I don't want anybody to feel rushed. But like I said, everything will go back with you all during the deliberations.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Friel.
Thank you, Judge. Please state your full name and spell your last name for the record.
My name is Daniel Hausdorff. Last name is spelled Hausdorf.
And how are you employed?
At the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, also known as FDLE.
And how long have you been with FDLE?
It'll be 11 years in September.
And what is your title and position?
I am a crime laboratory analyst in the firearms section.
And how long have you been in that position?
I've been in that position out of training since August of 2018.
And what are your official duties as a crime lab analyst in the firearms division?
My main duties include microscopic comparisons of fired ammunition components, such as cartridge cases and bullets. I also perform firearm function testing, which means I test fire the firearms as well as check the safeties. I perform distance determination, serial number restoration, and imaging cartridge cases into our database.
And when you say cartridge, well, we're going to get there, I'm sorry. What kind of training did you receive to become a firearms analyst?
I have a bachelor's degree in biomedical science from the University of South Florida. I was hired at FDLE in September of 2013 as a forensic technologist in the firearms section. That had 6 months of training, and I was in that position for about 3.5 years. I then was promoted to analyst and completed the 18-month training program to hold that position, and have been out of training since August of 2018.
Thank you. And do your daily duties include the analysis of firearms?
Yes, ma'am.
And have you previously testified as an expert in the field of firearm analysis?
Yes, I have.
Thank you. And can we just talk about ammunition first to kind of get the basics? What do you call a complete item of ammunition?
A cartridge.
And someone might refer to that as a bullet, but an intact live round.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you use the word cartridge.
Yes, ma'am.
And what are the components of a cartridge?
A cartridge is comprised of 4 parts. There's the cartridge case, which is the body of the cartridge. There's also the primer, the gunpowder, and the bullet.
And the bullet might also be referred to as?
A projectile.
Thank you. And does your analysis also regularly involve the analysis of semi-automatic firearms?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell me what a semi-automatic firearm is?
A semi-automatic firearm is a handgun that is going to fire one shot every time you pull the trigger, and the gases from firing is automatically going to cycle the firearm, extracting and ejecting a cartridge case and automatically loading another cartridge.
And so the cartridge case leaves the firearm every time?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's opposed to a revolver, is that right?
That's correct.
And I want to draw your attention to FDLE case 311227, the case you're here about today. Did you have the opportunity to examine evidence submitted to your lab under that case number?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you receive evidence into your lab, what's the normal procedure?
The normal procedure is the agency will submit the evidence to our lab, where it's given the unique FDLE case number, and then each item has a unique FDLE item number. It's given a case tracking form, which I receive from my supervisor when I'm assigned the case, and that has all the details of the case. And everything is tracked in our computer system called LIMS. It's the Laboratory Information Management System that just keeps all the information about the case and the evidence, where the custody of all the evidence is being held at that time, and things like that.
And when did you conduct your examination of the items in this case?
I started work in this case on March 9th of 2021.
And I want to first show you states number 13. It's already in evidence. It's open. Would you take a look at that and tell me if you recognize it as an item you received in your lab?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is it?
It's the Springfield Armory .45 auto pistol that I received.
And how do you know that it's the same firearm that you received in your lab?
It has the FDLE case number, item number, and my initials in my handwriting on both the pistol and the magazine.
Thank you, sir. And what type of analysis did you perform on this firearm?
So whenever I receive a firearm, I'm going to perform a function test on the firearm to make sure that it does fire, in fact, and also check the safeties on the firearm. In this case, there are 3 safeties on this firearm. There's a trigger safety, a grip safety, and a firing pin block. All are designed to make sure there's no accidental firing.
And was this firearm found to be in proper functioning order?
Yes, ma'am.
If Your Honor and the deputies don't mind, is it okay if he removes it to display it to the jury so I can ask him some questions?
It's empty.
Oh, I was gonna say, there's gloves here if you need them.
It's okay, sir.
Again, Mr. Taylor, if you need to reposition so you can see exactly what's going on, please feel free to do so.
Mr. Hausdorff,
Yes, ma'am.
would you mind just standing up so the jury can see and telling us the parts of the gun that you just talked about?
Yes, ma'am. So this is the top portion of the firearm called the slide. There's the trigger, where the trigger safety is right in front of the trigger here. There's the grip safety in the back, which is depressed by normal operation of the firearm. There's the firing pin block, which is housed in the slide that is deactivated when the trigger is pulled. And the way that this firearm works is there's ammunition loaded in the detachable box magazine. It's inserted in the grip of the firearm. At that point, I would release the slide and load one round into the chamber of the firearm. I would pull the trigger, which is going to cause the firing pin to release, striking that primer on the cartridge, causing a spark to go through the flash hole, and then the gunpowder, which is going to cause those rapidly expanding gases to propel the bullet down and out of the firearm. But it's also going to cause the slide to move rearward. The fired cartridge case is going to extract and eject out the side. As the slide moves back, it's going to recock the firearm, and then it will go back forward again, pulling another cartridge from the magazine and into the chamber of the firearm, ready to fire again.
Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry, Mom. Can we put it for a moment?
Of course.
Mr. Hausdorff, if we heard testimony that when this firearm was found, the slide was not totally seated, does that make sense to you? Am I saying the right words?
Are you basically saying that it wasn't in battery, that it wasn't all the way forward?
Yes, in battery, that's what he said.
Okay.
And that there was a live round still in the shape.
I'll allow it to set up the scenario.
And that the deputy testified there was a live round that was still in the chamber.
Okay.
Is that something you're familiar with occurring in firearms?
It's a possibility. If the extractor is really tight, if the spring is very tight on that, it's possible that it would not go around the extracting groove on the cartridge. If that happens, it could get stuck back just slightly. I mean, a quick jar to the back of the firearm could knock it over that. But normal operation of the firearm, it should cycle properly. And since I test fired it 3 times, I didn't have that issue when I was firing.
And if it were not seated and that live round was not in a completely normal position, would that prevent the gun from firing?
Yes, ma'am. It won't fire when it's out of battery.
Thank you. I'm now going to show you states 4 through 7, which I believe are your items 3 through. You take a look at states 4 through 7 and tell me if you recognize them as items you previously examined. I messed up.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And how do you know these are items you previously examined?
They all are marked with the FDLE case number, item number, and my initials and my handwriting.
And what are these items?
These are the fire cartridge cases that I received in this case.
And what is the caliber of these casings?
They're 45 auto plus P, and the plus P just stands for higher ammunition pressure.
And what does that mean, higher ammunition pressure?
It means they're loaded to have higher velocity.
And velocity is the speed in which they travel?
Yes, ma'am.
And how do you know the caliber of these casings?
It's written on the head of the cartridge, which is right back here.
And is there a name for that end of the cartridge?
That's the head.
Thank you. And what type of examination or testing did you conduct on these cartridge cases in states 4 through 7?
So these cartridge cases, I performed an examination that I was trying to compare these cartridge cases to the test fires that I created from this firearm to determine if they were fired in this particular firearm.
And how do you accomplish that?
So when I test fire the firearm in our indoor laboratory range, I use laboratory ammunition that's similar to the evidence that I received in this case. So I test fired 3 Hornady rounds that were 45 auto, which is the same brand that I received in this case. After I get done test firing it, I take the cartridge cases and the fired bullets that I received back to my office where I compare them under a comparison microscope. It's 2 microscopes joined by an optical bridge that allows me to view 2 objects at the same time under the same magnification. So what I'll do is first look at my test to test, and I determine what's the repeating pattern that's coming from the firearm itself that's being transitioned to the cartridge cases and bullets during the firing process.
Can I stop you there just
Yes,
so we can
ma'am.
talk about that part?
Yes.
We're really going. And so you said you first look at test to test, and can you explain slowly
Yes,
what you're looking for to compare those, to see your test and what you're looking for to determine that.
I'm looking for the reproducible pattern that's coming from the firearm. So what happens is when the cartridge case is fired, or the cartridge is fired, the cartridge case will expand back and make impressions from inside the chamber of the firearm, as well as this end of the firearm, which is known as the breech face. And this is where the firing pin comes through and strikes the primer. All that pressure is going to push the cartridge case back against those areas, and all the microscopic imperfections within the firearm are being transferred to these cartridge cases during firing. The reason is the firearm is the harder object, the cartridge case is the softer object. The same thing is happening with the bullet. The bullet is going to expand, also known as obturating. It's going to seal all the gases in the barrel, and there's rifling inside the barrel, known as the lands and grooves. It's going to seal all those gases. The impressions are going to be transferred from the barrel to the bullet.
And when you looked at your test fires, you said there were 3?
Yes, ma'am.
Did they all have consistent patterns on them?
Yes, they do.
And so once you determine that they in fact received consistent patterns, what's the next step?
The next step is to take the one that has the best representation of that firearm. It's essentially, if you think about it, you're making like an ink stamp on the ground. It's the same stamp, but depending on the pressure, the angle, it's not going to look exactly the same. So I'll pick the one that has the best representation of everything from the firearm. And when I do that, I'll place one of those test fires on the right side of my scope, and I'll take one of the unknown cartridge cases on the left side of my scope. And when I look at them on the oculars, I overlay the images on top of one another, and I can see the patterns repeating between one another.
And once you compared your test fires to the cartridge cases in states 4 through 7, did you make a determination about their relationship to this firearm?
Yes, ma'am. All 4 of these were in fact fired in this firearm.
Thank you. I want to now show you states 8, 9, 10. Would you like to take a look at these items?
Yes. Thank you.
And tell me if there are items that you've previously seen in your lab.
Yes, ma'am.
And how do you know?
They all have my markings on the base of the bullet with the FDLE item number, case number, and my initials in my handwriting.
And how are these items different from the cartridge cases we just talked about?
These are the bullets that are fired from the firearm.
And are you able to determine the caliber of fired bullets?
Yes, ma'am.
And how do you do that?
So what I'll do is a couple different ways. I'll measure the base of the bullet as well as the weight. And if I have both of those, that'll already give me my answer like that. And in this case, all 4 of these projectiles were intact, so I was able to tell the caliber just based off of that.
And what was the caliber you determined these bullets to be?
They're in 45 caliber class.
And that's the same caliber as the casings and the firearm, is that correct?
That's correct.
And what type, other than the weighing, the measurements, what type of examination or testing did you conduct on these projectiles or bullets?
So I did the same thing as the cartridge cases. I examined the test fires from this firearm to the bullets here, determining if they were or were not fired from this particular firearm.
And once you did that comparison, were you able to, did you determine?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, sorry. And I got distracted. And what was your finding?
That all 4 of these bullets were fired from this firearm.
Now, I think the first time you said fired in and then you said fired from.
The reason I just say in is the cartridge cases are technically in the firearm, and I say from because the bullets leave.
And so there's really no difference other than it's technical.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Finally, I want to turn your attention to States 15, which is a fragment. Will you take a look at that and tell me if it is also something you previously examined?
Yes, ma'am.
And how do you know that is something you previously examined?
On this one here, it was too small for me to mark on the evidence itself, but on the container, I have the FDLE case number, item number, and my initials in my handwriting.
And were you able to conduct any analysis of that item?
On this one, my only analysis was that it was no value for microscopic comparison because it was too small and there was no individual characteristics or rifling seen.
So you can't make any determination. Could you make any determinations in comparison to the firearm or any of the other evidence?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Does your work at FDLE also involve the chemical analysis of some clothing or other items?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you kind of describe what that entails?
So what that entails is what we're trying to accomplish is if there was a max distance to the discharge of the firearm to a garment that we receive. In this case, I received one T-shirt, And what I will do is I will visually, microscopically, and chemically test the t-shirt to see if there's any presence of gunshot residue or any vaporous lead from the firing process. So what happens when a gun goes off is there's a cloud of smoke that comes out of the gun. That's the vaporous lead that's caused from the primer material. What that is it will create basically a sooting around the hole, and it's indicative of a close shot. There's also gunpowder particles that can get left behind on the t-shirt as well. And some of those you can't see visually or microscopically, so we have to do chemical comparisons. In this case, I didn't see anything visually or microscopically, and I also did chemical testing to test for those burned gunpowder particles as well as that vaporous lead, and I was unable to determine anything.
You got ahead of me.
I'm sorry.
But it's okay. This is states too. Is this an item
Yes.
you previously analyzed in your lab?
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to slow you down a little bit and back up. So when you analyze this, you're looking for microscopic particles of
Gunpowder.
gunpowder. Thank you. And when you examined this shirt, did you find any of that?
No, ma'am.
And did you make any other observations, that indicated to you that this shirt was involved in a shooting at all?
Just besides the hole, no, ma'am.
Thank you. And what might explain the lack of gunshot powder on this shirt?
There's a multitude of reasons. Some of the common ones are going to be, it could be poor evidence handling. It could have maybe shaken off some of the gunpowder particles. It could be an intervening object. If there's something in between at the time of discharge, obviously those gunpowder particles or residues cannot make it to the actual t-shirt. It could be that there was either blood or debris that could have inhibited the chemical processing or masked any of the gunpowder residue that was on there. And then finally, it could be too far away to actually produce onto the shirt itself.
And what distance might you expect to find stippling on a shirt if those other factors were not involved?
It's various, but with a pistol of this nature, the gunpowder particles will typically fall off around 5 to 6 feet, and the vaporous lead will fall off around about 2 to 3 feet.
Thank you, sir. Judge, may I have just a moment?
Yes.
I don't have anything else for this witness, the defense may. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Cross.
Very briefly, so Mr. Hausdorff,
Your testimony here today is basically that the ammunition was fired from that gun in this case,
Yes, sir.
and you found no evidence of stippling or gunpowder residue.
That's correct.
And there's all kinds of reasons why that might be.
Yes, sir.
Thanks very much.
You're very welcome.
Peter,
No, sir. Thank you.
can this witness be released?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes, sir.
Sir, you're released.